What else do I want to open? Sweet. Right? Well, look at you. You got stream elements running and everything. Fine, just fine. Oh. Yeah. So no teams have clinched a playoff spot yet, but there are 2 or 3 that are mathematically eliminated. Yeah, I'm not sure about the Broncos. Broncos, maybe. I don't know. There's no way they're winning out. Yeah. Well, the truth is very offensive to some. And probably not even the one I sent you of that child crying. It's like it's at the point now where if the Raiders are leading after the second quarter, you might as well put money down that they're going to lose the game. No, which is fine by me because I'm pretty sure my Steelers play them in a couple weeks here. If I'm not mistaken. Right? What more can you do at that point? That's just hilarious. No, I behave. And if I was going to get mad on the road, it would have been when that asshole pulled up in front of me. Oh, man. Yeah, if Matt Canada can pull his head out of his ass, man, there's no reason we shouldn't make the playoffs at this point. It is. I mean, yeah, they just got to do like they've done the last couple of weeks. Yeah.
Welcome back, everybody, to the podcast. We are back live after a little bit of a hiatus. Welcome back. It is good to be back. Sterling, how you doing, my friend?
Doing good. You know, we missed y'all. It's tough going when we got to be out, but it's been a roller coaster of a few weeks watching football lately. You know, for both of us and fans all around the league. You know, lots of ups and downs all over the place. It's been good. It's been good.
I do not know why, but we are getting a weird feedback here.
It's been good.
So I'm going to try to figure that one out. But
on my end, or
just on the YouTube link, but I will try to figure it out.
okay, fair enough. Yeah, I mean, we were out for a few weeks, obviously. You know, as you guys know, Brendan's in school and stuff, and we said going into this that takes precedence. And so we had to take a few weeks off because things got a little hectic for him there, you know. But we're nearing the winter break now, so we thought we'd jump back into it. We got lots we'll be able to cover. You know, we weren't around for the trade deadline. You know, lots of moves happened there, and then we've seen some key injuries to some players that it's going to make it interesting going down the stretch here to see what happens in the standings and who's going to make the playoffs.
I think we got that one down, but
awesome, good.
Yeah. But yeah, no, a lot of very interesting stuff here coming over the next couple of weeks here in the football world. But yeah, obviously very, very busy, but happy to be back. Happy to be talking some more football with you, my friend. Obviously, right before we switched over here to the actual live portion, we were talking about Matt Canada attempting to try to pull his own head out of his own behind and trying to bring this team to a successful or to, compete for a playoff spot, because the Steelers aren't out of the playoffs. They're just
No,
not necessarily close either.
the AFC conference right now. So it's been interesting. Like, if you guys remember, I had been calling for them to fire Matt Canada for a while. I did a little more research and looked into it, and I understand why now Mike Tomlin couldn't really let him go at the bye week like so many Steelers fans wanted, because the O line coach and the wide receivers coach are both Matt Canada guys.
Yeah,
And so
and that's a
obviously,
tough one to move on from.
exactly, it's one thing to replace just an offensive coordinator or just a positional coach, but to have to replace three guys in the middle of the season, that's basically like throwing your season out. So
Yeah,
I understand where they came from. And for the most part, like first half football, Steelers, they've got a good game plan going in. But the problem I'm seeing with Matt Canada still is he's still playing this like college football coaching mentality where it's you go in with the game plan, that is your full game plan. He goes in at halftime and he doesn't make appropriate adjustments. If anything, it feels like as a fan, he goes in at halftime and shrinks his playbook down to like 5 or 6 plays for the second half. And then we don't see this ability to put points up on the board in the second half, which allows teams like the Bengals to start running the score up on us. Whereas in the first half of that Bengals game, it was tit for tat. We were keeping pace with them, and it could have been a competitive end to the game. But even the Bengals defense was like, yeah, we knew what they were calling every play in the second half because they only called 3 plays the whole second half. It was the same three, same run, same screen, same out route. That's it. So it was easy to shut them down. And that's something that they really need to remedy going forward is getting points in the second half. Because I maintain from season's beginning that with how good this defense is, they only need to put 20 points up on the board. 2 touchdowns, 2 field goals, you're going to win 90% of the games you play. And looking back, they very much would have if they had had TJ Watt for all those games as well. That definitely threw a wrench into it. But you look at the schedule going forward, they got the Ravens this Sunday without Lamar Jackson, and it's at home. So that should be an easy win. They have made Tyler Huntley look bad in the past, and I think they will again. We got two of the best pass rushers right now. Alex Highsmith, for some reason, is rated like 7th in the league, despite having better stats than Myles Garrett, who always gets rated number 1. And I don't get it. He's never got the number 1 stat line, but everybody is always like, oh, we want to suck Myles Garrett's dick. He's so fucking good. But it's like, no, TJ Watt was better than him last year. Alex Highsmith is better than him this year. Could you imagine if TJ Watt and Alex Highsmith were both healthy a full season? How scary that pass defense would be from the Steelers.
yeah, it's definitely one of those things where losing TJ Watt for, a good chunk of the season is not a recipe for success. And we saw that stat line immediately as soon as he went down. The Steelers, they were a good team with him there, but when he was gone, they were basically winless until a few weeks ago where they
Yep.
finally were able to get that. And that's a big situation there. And I also think that if Kenny Pickett was potentially in at the start of the season, you might see a different thing because Trubisky wasn't that great. But also looking at Kenny Pickett right now, only the 4 touchdowns, the 8 interceptions, low QBR. I think that's just obviously the Matt Canada system and him trying to learn on the fly.
That is the play call, and one thing positive for him is 8 interceptions in his first few games there, and then the bye week. He has not thrown an interception since that bye week.
True.
He cleaned up his play very well during that bye week, and so that is a positive going forward. And I've heard some people like yourself that are like, "Oh, Kenny Pickett should have been in there from week 1." I'm actually more on Ben Roethlisberger's side. I saw him on a podcast a couple weeks ago talking about how the first game he would have started Kenny Pickett was that first week after the bye against the Saints, and Kenny Pickett would have started 1-0 as a result.
Potentially,
And
yeah.
I agree with that. That would have been where I put Kenny Pickett in. Granted, maybe he wouldn't have played as well because he didn't have those few weeks before that. But we don't know. It's all question marks at that point.
Yeah, and this whole conversation of when do you start a quarterback and when you don't start a quarterback. Obviously, if you've ever watched this podcast before, you know that Sterling and myself are on very opposite sides of the spectrum. You're on the side of, if you're going to you're more the, I'm going to allow this guy to sit, but for me, I'm the, if you're drafting a guy in the first round, you play him as soon as you can play him, because that's what you're putting your time into. Granted, there are exceptions to the rule, like the Patrick Mahomes and the Tom Brady, or not the Tom Brady's, the Patrick Mahomes and the Aaron Rodgers, of where they sat
Mhm.
for a year, or in Aaron Rodgers' case, he sat for 3 years. But it's one of those things where I've also seen quarterbacks sit for a little bit and still not be good, because we saw Jared Goff when he came into the league, sat for half of that first year, and once he finally came in, he looked terrible. And I think the only reason that people didn't immediately just write him off is because Sean McVay came in and was able to elevate Jared Goff's play. And now that we've seen him in the Lions, granted, Jared Goff hasn't been bad. It's just one of those things, you're not looking at him saying he's been good either. But again, for me, I'm always, if the kid is going to be able to survive in this league, you got to put him in some fire right away. And
Yeah.
if he's successful at it, he's successful at it. If he takes his lumps, he takes his lumps. If he's bad, then you at least
Yeah. And I mean, I agree with you when you're drafting a guy and he's in a position where it's like, okay, you are the best guy in that position. We don't have anybody else. There's nobody else playing that left end spot or that cornerback spot or that quarterback spot. But when you've got other guys of talent, I'm very much, and I think this comes down to who we're fans of. Like the Steelers have always been a build through the draft, grow guys, and then you don't have to worry about going out in free agency and bringing in 3 or 4 key pieces just to have a competitive team.
know.
Whereas your Bears, you've had a struggling few years, maybe even decades. You haven't had that franchise quarterback. And so it's tough where you draft somebody and it's like, we got to get him in the game because we need our star. We need star power. Whereas the Steelers, it's always been about more that cohesive team, and one guy doesn't make it all.
Mhm,
That this whole issue we have on the defense, where if TJ Watt's not there, we're not as good. That is a problem in
mhm,
Pittsburgh, and that's one that they've been trying to remedy, and I think have done well. It just, TJ Watt is such a game changer that it's hard to be the same team without somebody like that on the field. You know?
Well, reigning defensive player of the year, ties the sack record while only playing, 15 of the games last year.
Yeah.
If he would have played a full slate of the season, he would have broken that sack record without a doubt. And you and I totally agree on the growing and development aspect. The only position that we don't agree on that is the quarterback spot. Because yeah, I agree with you. For me, the way that I've always looked at building a team, and this through us playing Madden franchise modes together, is that I'm all for the growing and developing of teams. Obviously, you still need to bring in some free agents, but it's the growing of development through the draft. But that quarterback position, to me, that's truly what makes your team. If you have a quarterback, you're going to be successful. But if you don't, you could have the best players at every single position, and if you don't have a quarterback, you're not going to be able to do anything. And there's
Yep.
people that say, well, there's been exceptions, like the Joe Flacco. Joe Flacco that year was playing at a good level,
Yeah.
and he had some successful years. I'm not going to sit here and say Joe Flacco was terrible his entire career, because he wasn't. Joe
No,
Flacco
there's
was a very
obviously
competent
exceptions to
quarterback.
that.
Yeah.
We've got an exception to that right now due to the injury issues that have happened to a certain team in San Francisco.
Mhm.
Like they started out the season with high hopes in Trey Lance, and he went down hurt. Luckily, they had the best backup quarterback in the league in Jimmy Garoppolo, who was able to come in and fill that role. And they were doing that for some time. And now he's down with a similar injury. And here comes Brock Purdy, Mr. Irrelevant.
Yep.
First time ever we've seen a Mr. Irrelevant starting at quarterback,
Yeah.
in his first season. And it's just that defense in San Francisco is so good that this 49ers team still has the potential to be one of the final four out of the NFC. I don't know if they're going to get much further than that, unfortunately, because you've got teams like the Eagles and the Cowboys that are just looking so good in the NFC right now. It's going to be really hard. And even the Seahawks, who you and I shit on so much in the preseason and at the start of the year that we were like, oh, they're going to be bottom three. They're going to have one of the
They're going to
best
be an
picks. They're going to have
absolute
the number one
joke.
overall.
Yeah.
And here they are sitting in
A
a
playoff
playoff spot.
spot. But the funny
It's just,
thing is, they still have a top 5 pick due to the Denver
yep,
Broncos, which
right?
is just utterly insane. We thought Seattle was going to have more of kind of like that middle of the draft first round due to Denver and then have that top 5 pick due to them, but
Mhm.
I don't think either team got the memo, and they're just like, I think some wires got crossed, they got confused, and now it's Seattle's doing good and Denver's doing bad. I think one of the greatest things that I've seen out of this entire Russell Wilson fiasco is that there was a guy at the beginning of the year on, it was either on Instagram or TikTok, I can't remember. He goes, "How many weeks until Russell Wilson has more passing touchdowns than he has bathrooms in his house?" And it was that funny little joke of like, oh, he has 12 bathrooms in his house, like he should have more passing touchdowns after 4 or 5 weeks. That seems realistic, that seems reasonable. And like, I recently saw one where it was like week 13 and guys still doing it, and he just looked so defeated. He's like, week 13 in the NFL, how many has Russell Wilson surpassed the amount of bathrooms he has in his house? Well, Sierra hasn't added any more bathrooms or taking any bathrooms away in their house, so they're still at 12. Russell Wilson, 10 touchdowns. Check back next week to see if he finally and it's, you could just see like he didn't think that it was possible that he could go on for this long. And one of the things that I actually mentioned to you before we jumped on here, because I know you were saying that you don't necessarily think it's all Russell Wilson's fault, until I brought up this point where, again, none of this has been confirmed. No Broncos player has gone out there and said Russell Wilson has done this, but just from the actions that I've seen on the sidelines from some of these players, I can get the sense that it is true. And one of the things that I heard was that Russell Wilson was calling Seattle Seahawks audibles for the Denver Broncos players. And you're kind of looking at that going like, yeah, you know what? I can kind of see it. Like, that's the insane part, is like, you're looking at that going, yeah, maybe that's why the Denver Broncos offense has been this bad, is because Russell Wilson will call out a play, and then in his mind he'll say the thing that he's been saying for the last 8 years when he was with Seattle, and like Jerry Judy's standing there going like, "What do you mean? Like, I don't know what you're saying. Like, you're speaking French while I speak English. Like, what is going on?"
Right? Like we thought this Broncos team was going to be competitive this year, but it's almost like a perfect storm of new quarterback who apparently has had some troubles, maybe shifting from the team he was with his whole career to a new team, and then an extremely rookie head coach,
Yeah.
which maybe made the jump to that position a little bit too soon, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And this is definitely going to hurt him, and I don't know if Hackett's going to be the head coach there next year.
Well, and that's just the potential thing, is that we I think the NFL is going to start to have this little bit of a switch here relatively soon, because we're seeing for the last few years it's always been, we need to get the next Sean McVay, we need to get the next, Kyle Shanahan, these offensive gurus that will just go out there and just be insanely innovative, and being able to just make it so that our offense is that great. But the thing is that for every Sean McVay and Kyle Shanahan out there, there are 6 or 7 guys that are copycats that just can't compete, and those are the guys that are unfortunately moving into those head coaching roles. And you look at, for instance, Matt LaFleur obviously having Nathaniel Hackett last year. Was it really Nathaniel Hackett's being the offensive coordinator that was really moving that team, or was it the guy who was actually making all the play calls in Matt LaFleur? and Aaron Rodgers being Aaron Rodgers with Devontae Adams still at that point,
Mhm.
really showing that what that offense was.
Yeah, and I think you're right. Like there's been so much emphasis on offense and exciting football, and they've been forcing these offensive-minded coaches into the head coach spots when not only are some of them not ready, but you've got the flip side of it, and you've got guys like Mike Tomlin and Brian Flores who are more defensive-minded. And we've always said, yeah, exciting football is great through the first 18 weeks of the season, but defense wins championships. You can be as flashy and as exciting as you want, but if you're going up against the best team and you can't score because that
Doesn't really
defense is
matter.
so much better, you're not going home with a ring.
Yep.
And that's what it comes down to. Is I think that there's been too much emphasis on that, and I think they need to scale it back. And I think you're right. We're going to see more of a shift and more of these defensive minded guys getting some of those head coaching roles, and then going, okay, you're my OC, you're going to be calling the plays, but I will pull the plug on you if things don't go well, like we're seeing in Pittsburgh.
Yeah.
Mike Tomlin can't really take over that play calling because he is a defensive minded coach. And so it's tough. He's got to rely on Matt Canada. He let him bring in his own guys, but now we're sort of in that limbo of, what happens if we don't make the playoffs? Do they fire Matt Canada and those two other guys and go a different route? But then if we do somehow make the playoffs, what does that mean for next year? Do they go, oh, well, we ended up, you know, getting better at the end of the year, and now we kind of got to ride with Matt Canada and see how it goes? But at that point, maybe that's the sign of progression from Matt Canada learning the NFL game more. Because we always talk about players getting drafted and coming up and how it's a different league, it's a different speed. You have to step your game up. It's the same thing with these coaches. They come from college ball. They're used to playing in these big programs and coaching in these big programs against other schools that don't have near as much talent, and they're like, oh yeah, I'm a great coach, man. We put up 45 points against this team in the first half, or we shut this other team out and we were so good. But you come to the NFL, that doesn't happen every week. You can't expect to be putting up 45, 50 points every week in the NFL like you might get away with in college.
Well, and going back to that point, we see like how often it almost seems like it's every couple of years where a highly touted college head coach comes into the NFL as a new head coach. It's like, oh, this guy's just going to be absolutely amazing. Like, look at what he was able to do with this, and that. We thought Urban Myers was potentially going to be that guy because every team that he touched turned to gold in college. Matt Rule did the same thing. With Liberty, he turned that program around. Baylor, after receiving the death sentence, was a team that was in the top 10 rankings, and he was able to do that. And even to the point of Nick Saban, when he coached in the NFL for the Miami Dolphins, he wasn't that same level of success, and it just kind of feels like to the point where it's easier for the players to transition than it is for college for coaches. And
Mhm.
yeah, it's kind of one of those things for Matt Canada. I would still get rid of Matt Canada at the end of the year, even if you guys do somehow make the playoffs, which is still a very, very big if, in my opinion. I would still want to move on from him just because you've seen 2 years of just. Is it only 2 years or is it more?
No, this is year two.
This is year two, but you've
Yeah.
seen 2 years at this point of just, obviously last year with Ben Roethlisberger, it didn't work really.
Yeah.
And then he was saying, like, I want Kenny Pickett, I want Kenny Pickett. And then he brought Kenny Pickett in, and it still didn't really work. And granted, that might just be for various reasons, but I feel like there's other opportunities that Mike Tomlin can go out there and say, okay, we've seen 2 years of this really just not working. Let's go
Mhm.
out there and get it to work.
Definitely. And you know what? We've brought it back around because we started this out talking about Pittsburgh and their chances at a playoff spot. And if they do make the playoffs, it's going to be hard to move on from Matt Canada. I think the smart thing to do would be to hire an offensive assistant. Much like Mike Tomlin did this year, bringing Brian Flores in as a as a defensive minded guy who wasn't necessarily the D coordinator, but I think if things had gone bad on defense, we would have seen a shift there where Brian Flores was plugged in as the D coordinator. I think that's what he might need to do next year, is bring in a couple extra guys who are just assistants, that if it starts badly again, you cut Matt Canada out and his guys out, and you install the other guys you brought in. And I know you're saying it's a long shot, but man, looking at the schedule, Kenny Pickett has played get better since the break. They're putting up points in the first half. As I said at the top of the show here, if Matt Canada can keep that consistent play calling and that variety without throwing in these trick plays for some reason, and we can keep putting points up in the second half, then this team can just they can run the gauntlet. Because as I said, we got Baltimore this week with a backup quarterback at home. We're going to win that. Then we got the Carolina Panthers, who have dismantled their team completely. That, in theory, should be another easy win. Following that, we have the the Las Vegas Raiders, who notoriously fall apart week after week after week. And then we get week 17, 18, which is all division games. We're going into Baltimore, and then we have Cleveland. And so those two games at the end of the year, they're always tough games, and the Steelers don't often lose them. And if Kenny Pickett can keep playing better the way he has, if he can protect the football, and if this team can put up 20 points a game in every one of those 5 games, I don't see any of those teams, apart from possibly the Ravens in week 17, scoring more than 20 points against that Steelers defense.
That's a very fair point. And granted, the Steelers really only do need to score about 20 points, but it's also one of those things of if they can score 20 points, because there has been times we've seen this season of where they have struggled to move the ball. But you bring up the Las Vegas Raiders, and that's another team that I want to talk about here. And obviously, they went into Thursday night's game up against the 3-10 Rams, or the 3-9 Rams at that point. And the Rams obviously brought in Baker Mayfield to the squad. I know you've never liked Baker Mayfield. I've always been a much bigger supporter of Baker Mayfield. And the the Rams won that game. And granted, the Rams didn't win that game. It was the Oakland Raiders, or the Las Vegas Raiders, losing that game. But at the same point, you have to give so much props to Baker Mayfield for going out there and giving the performance that he did. He didn't even know the playbook. And, he went out there and throw, 200, I think it was close to 250 and a touchdown, and 48 hours on the roster, and he was capable of doing that.
Yeah, but that's why I'm not high on the guy, though, because that's the only time he performs, is when it doesn't matter, when it means nothing. Then Baker Mayfield shows up all of a sudden.
But we've also seen Baker Mayfield. I think Baker Mayfield could, with that performance last night, and granted, we do need to see the rest of the season with how he plays with the Rams, because one of the things that I said with Baker going to Carolina is they need to really make sure that they focus the team around him and they continue to grow around him, because Baker is not going to be one of those quarterbacks that goes out there and wins with just a bunch of bums on his team. And unfortunately, we saw that in Carolina. There just really wasn't a whole lot of talent around him there. And I look at the Rams, for instance. If they can get healthy, this can be a good squad. And it's one of those things where I really want to see how Baker Mayfield plays out the rest of this year for the Rams, because he might have just played himself into that starting quarterback role next year for the Rams.
No, I don't think so. If Matt Stafford is healthy,
Well,
Stafford's a starter again.
if Stafford is healthy, but there's a
Yeah.
real opportunity that, or there's a real shot that Stafford retires at the end of this year, because
Yeah.
again, one of the things that we said even just back 2 years ago, that Stafford, he might be coming to a very close end to his career just because of all the injuries that we talked about. And we want to talk about how we make fun of Gronk for being literally a CTE case walking. Like Matt Stafford, that guy, when he's 50 years old, he's just going to be held together with like super glue and tape and
Yeah.
duct tape. And so for him, his wife might be like, you know what? You won your Super Bowl. You made a stupid amount of money throughout your NFL career. You might as well just call it quits at this point because it's not going to get better. At, it's not going to get better for him. And just maybe, if Baker Mayfield continues to play well, they look at him and say, "Hey, we have Cooper Rush, we have Von Jefferson, we actually have some players here. Chances are they might lose Aaron Donald at the end of this year too, but really getting to see what Sean McVay can do with a quarterback of Baker Mayfield's caliber. Because at the end of the day, I still think Baker Mayfield is a talented quarterback. He has the arm talent, he has the knowledge of the game. You just need to put some talent around him and really get a coach that will use him properly. And I think McVay can do that. We saw what he did with Jared Goff. Why can't he work magic with Baker Mayfield?
Yeah, I guess that remains to be seen. He Baker just hasn't shown enough to me to bring me around. Unfortunately, he has those flashes, but lots of guys have flashes. And it like to be a former, what was it, first overall pick?
First overall pick.
Like you got to be better than that.
Without a doubt. But
You
how
know.
often do we see first overall picks not live up to the hype?
Yep.
Just look at Trayvon Walker.
Mhm.
He's not one of the guys that we're talking about every single week, going like, "Oh my God, this guy's amazing." Trevor Lawrence the year before. Who, if we're gonna look at that quarterback class, who would you say in that Trevor Lawrence quarterback class is the best quarterback out of it? It's
I mean,
Justin
at this,
Fields.
I
It's
was
not.
gonna. Was Mac Jones the year after?
No, Mac Jones was the same year. It,
Honestly, I'd say Mac Jones.
with how he's played this year.
He's played well. It's been Matt Patricia. It's offensive coordinator problems in New England, just like it is in Pittsburgh, in
Uh,
my opinion.
to me, and again, obviously Bears fan here, but
Yes.
like Justin Fields is hands down the best quarterback out of that class, and you've seen it this year, and that's one of the things we'll obviously talk about later here in the cast. But it's just one of those things where the first overall pick, it's kind of a tricky one. Honestly,
Mhm.
kind of looking back at it, the last time I was really satisfied with a number one overall pick was probably Miles Garrett. And I know you're not the world's biggest fan of Miles Garrett, just because obviously he gets named so much more than, for instance, like a guy like TJ Watt
Mhm.
and other guys around the league. But he's that guy for a reason.
Oh, and yeah, don't get me wrong. He is good. It just drives me nuts to see him always put in that number one slot when
Yeah,
his stats don't warrant it.
for sure. And I
That's my only
totally
issue.
agree.
Like he's top 5 every year, top 3 most years, but I have not seen a season where he's number 1.
Yeah,
That's my issue.
yeah, for
And
sure.
he's always slated and put in the stat lines as number 1, and he's never the number 1 guy in the league.
Yeah.
That's my only issue with him.
Oh,
Like he is
I
good.
agree.
I don't like playing against him. I'm always worried when we go up against Cleveland for that reason that my quarterback or my running back is going to get completely destroyed.
Yeah, but again, just going back to that point is like, how often do we actually see these number one overall picks? We saw Jared Goff as a number one overall
Yeah,
pick. We saw Jameis Winston as a number one overall pick. It's a tough situation, and you
it
know,
is. It's really tough being the number 1 guy. And it's just it comes down to most of those guys when you look back on it shouldn't have been a number 1 pick. You know, I was even that year when Baker went number 1, I didn't think he should have been number 1. But for me, having watched him in college as well, like I always saw that attitude problem in Baker Mayfield. And that's the thing. As a quarterback, you have to be calm, cool, collected, like Justin Fields, Joe Burrow, Tom Brady.
you know what? It's funny enough you say Joe Burrow. He's actually the last number one overall pick. I can't believe I forgot about him.
But even so, like that's what I mean is you got to have that mindset as a quarterback. Whereas Baker Mayfield, even through his college years, he's like he's OBJ playing QB. He's that arrogant chip on his shoulder type of quarterback, and guys won't follow you. Because you end up blaming the other people for the mistakes that happen instead of taking that on your own shoulders. And that's a problem that you see. I mean, we saw that happen in New York this year, where
Mike White is I was just about to
yeah,
bring up Mike White, how, all the Jets players are, running around with t-shirts, and, they're talking so much about how they go to war for Mike White as opposed to this second overall pick in Zach Wilson. And
yep,
boy, oh boy, what Zach Wilson over his starting career is having worse numbers, or if not worse numbers, just as bad as Jamarcus Russell,
yep,
which is insane to think about. Because Zach Wilson, when he was coming into the NFL, we looked at him and said, this kid has just a cannon for an arm. He seems like he has a good head on his shoulders, and he should be a guy. I don't think he should have been taken ahead of Justin Fields, but he was a guy. And now we're seeing this, how he just doesn't go to bat for his team.
hmm
That one week where he threw for 70 yards, and they asked, did you do enough for your defense? And he goes, yep.
yeah,
Or you're just sitting back going like, really?
yeah. He went to the wrong program. He needed somewhere that was a similar attitude to like a Baker Mayfield, and that's just it. If Baker had been drafted somewhere other than Cleveland, I'd probably feel differently about him now, because he probably would have been more successful and probably would have gotten the tools he needed to succeed.
Yeah.
The problem is a lot of these first overall picks who are quarterbacks go to these teams that do not have good programs in place, like Cleveland, like the Jets, and it doesn't end well.
Yeah, no, I agree. But moving back to the AFC West, I love our ADHD tangents where we'll just get on one topic and then another and another and another. But yeah, going back to the AFC West, this was a division that we talked about at the beginning of the year, and then going into the preseason. This was going to be four teams all battling it out to see who was going to be that number one spot. And we genuinely thought we could see three teams come out of that AFC.
We thought it could be the first time we saw four teams from one division make the playoffs.
Yeah.
And
And
instead, we've seen the flip side of it, where it's actually the East, AFC East and NFC East, that could potentially end up having that happen instead.
yeah, well, and obviously, I said, it's going to be a battle between Kansas City and the Chargers. We all looked at it and said Kansas City, they got a little bit worse this year, but we all still had a lot of faith in that they were going to be a very good team. I looked at the Chargers and went, all the moves that they have done, they just look like an unstoppable force this year. And they haven't been able to do it. The Denver Broncos are doing Denver donkey things.
Let's ride.
Yep, donkeys, let's ride. And then the Raiders, they just can't keep beating themselves. Like, here's the thing with the Raiders this year is that they have never won a game where they've been up double digits. But the biggest thing is they really have never lost a game.
Mhm.
And when I mean that, they've never gotten beaten by a team. They go out there and solely beat themselves, because they should have, in all intensive purposes, won that game. Max Crosby got that sack, and then Jerry Tillery decides to go up to Baker Mayfield in front of the referee and
Mhm.
slap the ball out of his hands. You're sitting back going like, that is a move that gets you cut. The only reason Tillery hasn't been cut by the Raiders by this point, and he still might be, is because he's been playing well for the Raiders. That
Yeah.
is like that is so Raiders of a move that they
Yeah.
do right there.
This is a team that should be 9-4 right now, but they've beaten themselves 5 times this year.
Yep.
So
And
instead, they're sitting at 5-8.
it's just crazy to think about that. It just doesn't seem possible. But then obviously with that whole Russell Wilson thing, we talked about it earlier, but it's still just absolutely mind-boggling that that team has been this bad. And granted, it's Russell Wilson, calling wrong audibles, Nathaniel Hackett not being ready to step into this role as a head coach in
Mhm.
the NFL. It's obviously Kansas City's division to take or
It
to
is, and
lose.
I mean, the Chargers have been disappointing as well. Like, it's I'm seeing a lot of memes where it's, Justin Herbert is just Philip Rivers 2.0 with a better pullout game. That's all it is.
What? Yeah.
Like it's unfortunate, but like you look at his stats, you look at everything that's happened with this Chargers team, you look at the talent he has around him, and you look back at the career of Philip Rivers and you go, holy crap, this is just the same Chargers team that we've seen for the last 15 years. That's all it is. And you start to wonder where the actual problem is, because it's getting to the point now where you can't put it on the players. It's got to be in the front office or on the coaching staff. This team should be so much better than it is. Granted, there were a couple weeks there where Herbert was playing a little hurt, a
Well,
little
that team has
injured,
just been decimated with injuries as well
right?
this year.
We've seen it all around the league. It's been a rough year for injuries, and big injuries too.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's unfortunate to see, because like I really wanted to see this Chargers team do well, obviously, because the Chicago Bears fans, we gave them Khalil Mack.
Mhm.
So I obviously wanted to see him do well, and like I've just been so fascinated with the growth and development of Justin Herbert, because he was so close to getting into the playoffs last year. He was literally just, it was in his fingertips and it got pulled away from him. He didn't drop it, it got pulled away from him. And now we're just like, okay, this team is going to be that team.
Yep.
And it's just insane. But now moving over to the AFC East thing, where obviously I think we all didn't think the Miami Dolphins would be as good as what they are, but we all knew they were still going to be better. It was obviously dependent on how Tua was going to play. Tua,
Mhm.
pretty much in all of the games, with the exception of last week, played phenomenal. Has played phenomenal. Last week, he didn't look like he had ever played quarterback in the NFL or ever, but every other game, with the exception of his brains being turned into mashed potatoes, he's
Right.
looked unbelievable. And Mike McDaniels, yeah, has just been an unbelievable find for the Miami Dolphins. Let's see if that's sustainable for them. But
And
Buffalo
he's
Bills,
entertaining to watch for a head coach too.
oh,
Like
so
his sound
entertaining.
bites are just next level.
I just know the soundbite of him when he went up against the Bears. He just goes up the field with just an angry look, and he just says, "Stop scrambling, stop."
Yeah.
And then at
Stop
the end of the
running.
yeah, at the end of the game, so what'd you say to Justin Fields there? I just told him to stop scrambling. Why? Because I wanted him to stop scrambling. I figured that no other coach had really talked to him about this, so I figured I'd give it a shot. And it's really annoying because he didn't listen. He's just easily one of the most entertaining head coaches out there, and I hope he continues to have a really, really good career, because he is so entertaining.
Yeah, I hope so, because and there's a lot of talent on that Miami team. We'll have to see what they can put together next year as well. We
Yeah.
might finally see the changing of the guard actually happening in the AFC East. Instead of it just being a one-off year. It's just the first year where it's not Bill Belichick that we're talking about.
Yeah,
So
and funny enough, if you would have told me this AFC what or East, that the Patriots wouldn't have been first or second, I would have been like, yeah, third.
yeah,
But for them to be fourth, and so handily in fourth, I would have been like, no, I don't believe you, because there's this team called the New York Jets,
yeah,
and they always find ways to do New York Jets things, and
they still could.
they still could. But here's the thing, is that Mike White has given this team such a boost of confidence, and that defense that they have is so good that it's almost kind of like watching the San Francisco 49ers. They just have such an unbelievable defense, and their offense is now finally having the confidence of the right quarterback playing there. It's just fascinating to watch.
Yeah, I think if Brees Hall hadn't gone down to injury, this Jets team would be a force.
Yeah.
But you know, uh, they're still one dimensional, unfortunately, with Mike White in there. And not having Brees Hall in the backfield definitely hurts them. And so I think we're going to see them still falter down the stretch here, and maybe even miss the playoffs at this point.
Maybe, but it would be a very tough one for me to say that they're going to miss the play. Obviously, it's still a tough ask for them to get into the playoffs, still being, but they're not out of it, not by
Well, no,
any
they just
means.
have to win.
Yeah,
Because I mean, even going back to my Steelers, like all they have to do is win to get in. If the Steelers win every one of their 5 games, and then I think there's one of 6 teams that loses one game throughout that stretch, the Steelers are in. So the
yes.
Jets have an easier path than
Mhm.
say Pittsburgh does to get in. They win out, they're in hands down. They don't have to rely on another team to lose at any point.
Yeah. And that's kind of nice to have that, no matter what, we hold our own destiny.
Yeah.
Granted, the Steelers hold their own destiny, but they also have a lot that needs to go for their way as well. But it is one of those things right now where you're just like, wow, the Jets could really break this what feels like billion year streak of not being able to make the playoffs.
Yep.
And the Patriots just don't look amazing. And
Well, and I mean, those are the two bottom teams, the two top teams in the Bills and the Dolphins. The last time the two of them made the playoffs was 1998. That was the last time that both of those teams were in the playoffs from the AFC East. So it's been a long time coming that those two are tops. And yeah, I don't know what's going on with the Patriots because they've usually had this sort of grit to them where they can pull out these wins no matter what, but there seems to be almost like there there's a disconnect between the coaching staff and the players on offense especially.
oh, without a
Like
doubt.
there's issues going on. I think Bill Belichick's going to get rid of Matt Patricia after this season and he's going to go looking for another OC.
He very well could. And obviously, with Matt Patricia this year, we didn't know who was going to be the offensive play caller until pretty much week one, which is a very, very tough thing to really try to handle and deal with because, like, how do you not know who your play caller is going to be until week one of the season?
Right?
But yeah, now the NFC
Well, before
West.
we go too far with this, with the AFC East here, there's been a interesting change. We had a discussion at the start of the season. We did our boom or busts, where you and I are in disagreement on a certain player in Von Miller. You thought he was going to boom. I thought he was going to
I
bust.
thought he was going to bust.
Did you? I thought we
Yeah.
disagreed on that one.
No, we both agreed
Okay,
that
so
he was
we
going to
agreed
bust.
on that one. We both thought he was going to bust. Up to this point in the season, though, we were both wrong because he's
Hmm.
been booming. He turned that defense around. He's been the linchpin, and now he's gone,
Yep.
which sort of proves our point because the time when the Bills needed Von Miller is
He's gone
coming up,
for.
and
Yep.
he's not going to be there. They needed him in January for the playoffs, and he's not going to be there now. I don't know if this Bills team has enough on defense to be able to keep pace with the other offensive juggernauts that they're going to go up against in the Miami Dolphins, in the Kansas City Chiefs, in the Cincinnati Bengals. And
Yeah.
so I think at this point, with that one injury, the Bills have gone from what I think was a borderline favorite, sort of tied with the Bengals there to win the AFC, to now being fourth in line to win the AFC.
Yeah. Right now, I think if you're looking at the AFC pecking order, who's the team that you would put at the crown, like the team to beat right now? And I think it's the Cincinnati Bengals. And
100%.
the reason why I say it's the Cincinnati Bengals is because they had that early Super Bowl hangover struggle at the beginning of the year, but now they've found the momentum at the right time and they are peaking, or they're starting to get on the rise at the right time. And that's a scary thought because the Bengals still at the beginning of the year were a good team. It's just that they needed to work out and iron out a couple of issues. The last couple of weeks, they haven't even had Joe Mixon. Imagine what they'll be like when they have him back. Like it
Right. And
is
before that, they were without Jamar Chase and they were still getting it done. And now they're going to be without is it Tyler Hurst?
yeah.
Yeah. So he's out at least this week. We don't know if it's beyond there, but they have managed their injuries throughout the season and just
Mhm.
gotten better. The only hiccups that the Bengals have going forward is within their own division, and that's they've got the Browns and the Ravens that they still have to play, and those are physical games. They have to keep Joe Burrow healthy until the playoffs for them to
Yes.
be the number one team, in my
I think
opinion.
less
But
so with the Ravens, more so with Cleveland this year, just because I think Cincinnati is going to be able to control the offensive play a little bit more because obviously they know they don't have to worry as much about having that explosive Lamar Jackson offense out there. And so I
it's
think they're
more
going to
worrying
control
about
it.
the guys you've got on defense, because in Cleveland, as we talked about, you got Myles Garrett, who's going to be coming after your quarterback.
Yep.
And then Baltimore now has Roquan Smith, who granted most of the time will play it more in coverage, but he's not a stranger to getting after a quarterback, especially a mobile quarterback like Joe Burrow.
Well, and the last time Roquan Smith played Joe Burrow, he picked him off for a pick six.
Yeah.
So, but that was a long time ago. That was like week 2 of last year. But it is one of those things where the Bears are not the Bears, the Bengals are the team to beat, and
There.
the we all thought it was going to be the Chiefs again, but then we saw the Chiefs play Cincinnati and Joe Burrow again. In my opinion, he's the MVP this year, just from what he's been capable of doing.
He's undefeated against Patrick Mahomes.
Mm-hmm.
He hasn't lost to Patrick Mahomes. They beat him 3 times now.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he's put up the numbers for MVP talk. I mean, unfortunately, I think Patrick Mahomes has better stats in terms of an MVP run. Honestly, at this point, I think it's between Patrick Mahomes and Jalen Hurts for
The only
MVP.
reason that I say that it's not necessarily one of those guys is because I don't necessarily think the MVP award should be on who puts up the best stats. It should be the most valuable player. And if you take away Jalen Hurts from the Eagles, granted they're not going to be the same team. You do the same thing with the Chiefs, but if you take away Joe Burrow from the Bengals, that team collapses. It is a honestly might even be a winless team.
Honestly, all 3 of those teams collapse in that
They
situation.
they do. They
Yeah,
they really do.
that's why it's so tough, and that's why I think it's going to come down to like more of the division records and how well they've played in their own division and conference. Whereas like the Chiefs, we know are winning the division. The Eagles, I think we can
We can
confidently say are
safely
going to
say
win
they're
that.
going to win that division. Like
Exactly.
in my
Whereas the
opinion, they are
Bengals,
the favorite for that NFC.
yeah. Whereas the Bengals, they're still at this point tied with the Ravens, and any of the any of the 3 teams in the AFC North could still win that division.
Are you
You
saying
know,
the Browns can't win that division?
no, any of the 3 other teams from the
Oh,
Bengals.
I thought you
The
said just the 3 teams. I was like,
Yeah,
oh,
no, any of the other 3. The Browns could win out and still win that division as well. None of these teams are out of the running for the AFC North division title.
yeah, and it's just insane what they've been able to do. But yeah, that it is going to be exciting as all hell to watch over these next few weeks, just because obviously it's going to start to really come down to these
Mhm.
next couple weeks, and obviously moving over to the NFC where it's a lot less competitive, where it really feels like it's the Dallas Cowboys, which we all know they're going to lose in the first round of the playoffs anyways. The Philadelphia Eagles, who they're a team, like they are the team to beat. Tampa Bay is starting to kind of figure it out, but we're still not confident in them. But the funny thing is with Tampa Bay is that we could be looking at them going, Tom Brady goes out there week 1 of the playoffs, beats whoever, but then he could have the potential of playing Geno Smith. Then he could have the potential of playing Brock Purdy in the playoffs, where you're just like, really? Like really? Like this could be his potential path to another Super Bowl, is
Yep.
having to go through those 2 guys. And that's one of the things we talk about, is that you need a quarterback to be able to, in the playoffs particularly. And wow.
I know it's crazy. The injuries have made some interesting potential. I mean, we get to see this week the largest age difference between two starting quarterbacks in NFL history in Tom Brady versus Brock Purdy.
Yeah. Yeah. Brady has played in the NFL longer than Brock Purdy has been alive,
Yep.
which is, yep. Imagine that handshake at the beginning of the game, like, oh, hey, I was playing football before you came out of your dad's balls,
Right.
in the NFL, being paid professionally. And just honestly insane. But it's also crazy to think about how bad Tampa Bay has been at times. Granted, Brady is now 3-1 after Giselle was the third person to take a ring from Tom Brady over his career, but yeah, it's
But I mean,
just
and that's a tough thing for him to be trying to play through a season while going through divorce proceedings and stuff. That's not going to be easy on anybody.
what, yeah, without a
So
doubt.
that is tough.
Yeah, you can't really look at that situation and go like, oh, you know what, like it was going to be just an easy situation for him to, just like take that out of mind. But yeah, lot of distractions for him just this entire season, which is not favorable for anybody really. But yeah, like I'm looking at all the NFC teams right now, and obviously we have Seattle. They're likely to win that division. Then we have Minnesota, which right now I don't really have that faith in Minnesota. I don't have the faith in Kirk Cousins.
Yeah, and it's just it's Kirk Cousins in prime time. And that's the
Yeah.
thing. Once you make the playoffs, you every game is prime time.
Hmm.
And Kirk Cousins does not perform well under the bright lights. Like he's a great game manager. He can win you football games throughout the season unless it's Monday Night Football or Sunday Night Football or
Or
Thursday
Thursday
Night
night
Football.
football, or
And that
Saturday night football.
right? And so like that's what it's going to come down to is I think he's just going to choke under that pressure and like they're one of the better teams in the standings and nobody's talking about them. And it's not like they're one of these teams where they play better when they're the underdog. They don't. They play the same no matter what. And it's too easy to pick them apart when the stakes are high.
Really is, and we've seen them be in some interesting games before too, like Chicago, with the exception of one player not fumbling a ball, was going to beat Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
And there has been games for Minnesota that they have come dangerously close to losing. So again, like I've said, like I don't really have a large amount of faith in Minnesota, but
No.
they're going to win
Well,
their division.
yeah, even this week, I believe they're playing the Lions.
Yeah.
And honestly, with how well Jared Goff and the Detroit Lions have been playing the last 4 to 5 weeks,
You can't
I
count them out.
no, I have more faith that the Lions will win this game than the Vikings.
I don't know if I would necessarily say the Lions, I would have more faith in them, but I look at this game and I go, if you would have told me at the beginning of the year that the Lions were a 5-win team and Minnesota had 9 and it was a large favorite for Minnesota, I would have been like, yeah, I could believe that. But now at this point, I'm like, it really doesn't feel like it's that cut, copy, and paste for it either, which is the weird thing to have happen. And yeah, again, so we have that team. Obviously, we have the Cowboys who are playing really really well. Washington finally got smart and were like, you know what, we're not gonna do. We're not gonna play Carson Wentz, and we're gonna play the guy that has actually been good for us the last couple of years. Like,
Yep.
granted, he's not Taylor Heineke is not the best player in the NFL, but he's better than the other quarterbacks that Washington has tried to bring in.
Right? Like he's their Jacoby Brissett essentially.
Hmm.
He's a serviceable, good quarterback that can get the job done, and the players around him believe in him.
Hmm.
And that's just it. A guy like Carson Wentz, much like Baker Mayfield, in my opinion, does not inspire confidence. Whereas Taylor Heineke does. And even then, if that hadn't worked out, we got to remember they drafted a quarterback this year as well, and so
He
they've
did get
still
hurt though.
did he? Okay,
Yeah, like he got hurt in preseason, so
yeah.
that was kind of the unfortunate thing.
But even going forward, like this Washington team could have something going forward. While we're on the NFC East, because I think this is where he's going to land, I'm just not sure where. There's been a lot of hype the last couple weeks over the OBJ sweepstakes. Where is Odell Beckham Jr. gonna sign? I'm
I don't
sure
think
he
he's going to
is.
sign anywhere this year.
I think he is so happy he didn't sign with the Rams at this point, looking
Yep.
at what their record is. But he's been meeting with teams the last couple weeks, especially
But they've
teams
been
in the
getting
NFC
worried
East.
about his medicals. That's the thing.
They do, but when he got injured last year and with that surgery, the expected return time was going to be December, January of this year for him.
Yeah,
Of the
and
season.
most teams still don't even have faith that he's going to be able to play then.
Oh, you don't think so? Okay,
Well,
fair.
there was a report that came out today. It was either today or yesterday that a report came out that the Rams, when they signed Odell Beckham from Cleveland, that they already had concerns about his knee.
Yeah.
And obviously tore his knee in the Super Bowl. And like I said this earlier, like earlier down the road on one of our previous podcasts, that I don't know why any team would go out there and sign Odell Beckham, because the thing with him is that we talk about, we see players tear their knees in preseason and they're out for the entire year, and then we get to them next year in like the off season, we're like, are they ready yet? Like, we're still very ginger with them. We need to remember Odell Beckham hasn't even been a full year yet in, like, out of not tearing his knee, or out
Fair.
of tearing his knee. And
Yeah.
I just, obviously the Cowboys, I think, would have signed him already if they were confident in his knee. I think Buffalo probably would have done that as well. But yeah, it's, where is he going to sign? I do think it's going to be in the offseason when he finally does sign.
Yeah, you think so? Because I really thought like I could see one of these teams, especially in the NFC East, just taking a stab at him, going, okay, you know what? We're going to sign you, but it's only for 1 year. It's only for the rest of this season. It's not going to be for big,
Oh, it
big
would be a
bucks or anything
small
like that.
contract.
But I mean, a guy like OBJ, if his knee is almost healed and you think there's a chance you could get him on the field in the NFC Championship game and or the Super Bowl, and say he only catches one pass in each of those games, but it's a first down or a touchdown that changes the game. Is that not worth it? Is that not worth the risk?
But I don't think OBJ wants to sign that league minimum deal. He has the Super Bowl ring at this point. He's made a bunch of money. I think for him, the thing that he's looking at, and I've heard reports saying that he wants that long-term contract. Like, he doesn't want to just be a guy that's being, a year rental, and then, he's off to another team, and then another year rental. And I don't think any team is going to sign him to that, long-term deal just to hopefully have him. And I don't think OBJ is going to take a 1 year deal at this point.
No.
But like, I agree
That's
with
fair.
you. If you had the option to sign him for, let's say, a million, just
Yeah.
a quick easy $1 million for the rest of the year, and for him to have that circumstance, yeah, that's great. But I just don't think Odell is gonna do that, unfortunately.
Fair. I don't think he's going to get that payday if he doesn't.
He very
It's,
well might not, but
you
this
know,
whole Odell situation has just been so weird, because, again, for me, I just really look at it and go, why would anyone want to sign him with the knee issues when we know we already have all these concerns with players basically taking almost sometimes 12 months before
mhm.
we're really even confident with that, and it hasn't even been 10 months yet for this guy,
Fair. I
who
just
has
could.
torn his knee twice now.
True, true. I could just see him going, you know what? Maybe get another ring this way. Because,
Maybe.
all the talk's been around Giants and Cowboys, but like, could you imagine the Eagles swooping in there, signing him, and you just put in the clause and go, well, look, if you're not ready to go and you can't play in any of these playoff games for us, then you don't get paid,
Yeah,
is what it comes down to, and like, could you imagine him lining up as the third wide receiver for that Eagles offense?
it would be stupid. It would
right?
be utterly, utterly stupid.
It would be the thing that I think put them over and guarantees them making the Super Bowl if he can be healthy and if he can play.
Yeah,
You know,
and
I
that
didn't
that's
think
the
he was
biggest
still
if
that
though.
far behind. You know, with all the talk that's been going on around him, I really thought he was much closer to, you know, being able to tie him up and get on the field.
Yeah, I still struggle to think that he's ready as of yet. I just do not believe that he's ready to go. And obviously now there's more reports coming out. And again, I don't know how accurate that report is because obviously we didn't hear any of the issues with his knee when he got signed last year. But if the Rams already had initial concerns with that, it could be just a lot of who say we hear a lot of that in the NFL, but it's one of those things where it could potentially be happen. And Sterling, I lost you here, and you're back. I think
Oh,
think it was
where did
just
you go? You
your
dropped
Wi-Fi.
out on me.
Yeah, you back? Good. Hello.
Sorry, peeps. We're having some technical difficulties.
I see you. Can you see me?
Just gonna
Hello.
see if we can get Brendan back here.
I'm here, and yeah, I don't. Sterling, can you hear me? I'm here, and just the technical difficulties funds. Hello. Maybe you just have to leave and
Oh,
re-enter. Are you
you're
back?
here. I can't see or hear you.
Really? Well, that's no good. Never experienced this issue before, which is weird because we can see both of each other on the stream. But yeah, regarding the situation here, it is yeah, I don't know what's happening. Very weird. We will be back here in just a quick second while we try to figure some stuff. See you. All right, now that we do have Sterling back, just got to get him back here on the screen. Should be back up on momentarily here. And here he is. And we're back. So
Goody.
I'm not entirely sure what happened on that. It looks like you just went black on my screen and then you came back. I could see and hear you. I guess you just couldn't hear or see me.
Nope, you had disappeared completely from mine.
Weird.
Yes.
But we are back and it is good to go. But
Yeah. YouTube was like, stop talking about Odell Beckham Jr. This is boring.
yeah,
Yeah.
apparently. But yeah, the rest of the NFC, it is going to be really, really interesting to see what happens because obviously the Eagles are the favorite. We know the Cowboys are going to end up making the playoffs. The Vikings are going to make it. It looks like it's going to be Tampa Bay sneaking in, so that's four teams right there. And then from the NFC, then we also have Seattle making it, and then at that moment, it's just like, who else is gonna make it in?
Yeah, who's going to get those wild card spots? And really, I think it's going to come down to Cowboys and Niners are going to get wild card spots. And then it's going to be, can the Giants hold on to that last wild card spot? Or is somebody going to be able to overtake them?
Yeah, and the thing is, we can't even rule out Washington that much either.
True. Yeah, because there's a lot of division games coming up in that NFC East, in most of the divisions, really.
Yeah.
The NFL scheduled really well this year to the point where there's a lot of divisional play that's going to make or break playoff chances in the next 4 weeks.
Without a doubt. And it's getting really, really exciting. But for me, obviously, as a Chicago Bears fan, I haven't been thinking about playoffs since how old am I? 25?
Since you have Mitchell Trubisky as a quarterback,
No.
I mean, wasn't that the last time you made the playoffs?
Yep.
Yeah. So that's the last time you were able to think about playoffs.
That was more depressing at that time. But yeah, for this team right now, going back to that LA Rams Las Vegas Raiders game, I needed the Rams to win that because with the Rams winning that, it just kind of gives the Chicago Bears just that much better of an opportunity to get the second overall pick. And I want the Bears to have that second overall pick because we know the Texans at this time, they're going to select a quarterback. Whether that's CJ Stroud or Bryce Young, I still think it's CJ Stroud. I know you think it's Bryce Young. We could go on for days about that conversation and that argument, but for another quarterback needy team, they have to look at the Bears and go, we want to move up to this spot. And I'm just thinking about the massive haul a team would have to give Chicago to get that because Chicago doesn't need to move out. They can sit back and go, we'll take Will Anderson or Jalen Carter. We are more than happy as shit to have that opportunity to draft one of those two guys. But they're also not going to sit back and go, we're not going, if you're going to offer us a buttload of picks. Like I did a mock draft here not too long ago, and in this mock draft, the Detroit Lions offered me the fourth overall pick, the 15th overall pick, the 45th pick, and next year's first round pick for the second and 56th pick. I'm like, yes, take that now. And with that, I was able to select Jalen Carter and Paris Johnson Jr. with those two first round picks, getting arguably one of the best D tackle prospects to come out in forever and to get a true number one tackle for Justin Fields for protection. It's like, yeah, that is a no-brainer.
Right. And I mean, I want your Bears to get those picks too, because we made that trade at the deadline, sent you guys Chase Claypool for that Chicago Bears second round pick, which
Yep.
right now would be the 34th overall pick, which is as good, almost as good as a late first round pick, really.
It
And
is.
and that leaves the Steelers with three, high number picks in the first two rounds.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you guys now have three top 50 picks at that
Yep.
point, which is really, really nice to have, and that's going to be super, super helpful. But yeah, for the Bears, I'm looking at like we are just going to be able to rob a team blind potentially over these next over that draft period. And even if you don't decide to trade back or do anything, you're still going to get one of these guys in a Will Anderson or a Jalen Carter that you just go, damn, that boy is stupidly good and is going to change the Chicago Bears defense.
Yeah. Which, granted, now you guys kind of need a player like that, especially in the middle of the field, to replace someone like Roquan Smith. Your secondary is coming along nicely. You guys are going to have one of the better secondaries in the league next season. So
Yep.
you're pretty good there. But yeah, you definitely need something in the linebacker D line.
For me, the biggest issue on this team, it's not wide receiver, it's not offensive line, it's completely on the D line because the fact that Jaquan Brisker, our second round safety out of Penn State, leads the team in sacks with 3 is extremely, extremely depressing
Yeah.
because you should never have your safety, leading your team in sacks ever. And the fact that he's doing it with 3 and no player on the D line has been capable of doing better than that, it's horrific.
Well, and that makes it easy to pick your defense apart too, because that tells other teams that you can't just rush 4.
Yeah.
That tells teams that you're going to be bringing an extra guy, at least one extra guy on almost every down if you even have a hope of getting to the quarterback, which means somebody's going to be open downfield. So if your O line is good enough and you can hold them for 3, 4, 5 seconds, you're going to get a big chunk play every time.
hmm Well, and like I just watch the Bears every single week, and I watch them on defense. It's almost like I don't want to watch them on defense anymore because it's boring. I'm not seeing anything. It was particularly the last couple weeks when Eddie Jackson's been down, Kyle
Mhm.
Gordon and Jaquan Brisker have both been down. It's been one of those things of like, why would I even want to watch them play if they've been this bad already with these nice young secondary pieces? Like why would I continue to go down that road? And like even when I do watch, I'll watch the pass rush because that's typically what you see when the quarterbacks you're going, you're just like, all right, no one's getting open, cool, like great, like or no one's getting by, there's just no pressure. Every quarterback is sitting back looking around going, oh, I could have a smoke break here, with the amount of time that I have. It's disgusting.
And it's unfortunate too because Justin Fields has come along nicely this year. Adding Chase Claypool to that receiving core has been a godsend for that offense. You got one of the better run games, you got a good receiver core now, and you've been able to put points up on the board. The problem is then when you get onto defense, it's you're just watching the other team march down the field easily without even breaking a wind, it seems, in some cases, and just easily matching you point for point. And even if they don't at the beginning of the game, there's the concern and the reality that later in the game, those teams, they're just going to be able to work their way down the field and come back.
Yep.
Like even last week, it looked like you guys had the Packers on the ropes early on.
And then they just
And
let it go away.
exactly. And it just sort of deflated.
Yeah, very, very frustrating. So at this point in the year, it's one of those things. Yeah, and as you've been well aware, I've been extremely down on this team pretty much since the start. It's very rare that I'll actually pick this team to win. I think I maybe have done it twice this year. One time I actually got it right, and the other time I didn't. But it really is kind of going to the point of like, yeah, I'm ready for the season to end, get to the free agency portion,
Yeah.
get to the draft, make life just a little bit easier on me and my fellow Chicago Bears fans over the next couple of years, because I think this year Justin Fields has solidified himself as one of the most dangerous quarterbacks in the entire NFL.
Hmm.
You add him, you just give him a little bit more protection, you add a couple more weapons on the offense, it's going to be unstoppable.
Yeah. And that's just it. He needs that little bit more protection so that he doesn't always have to scramble for 30, 40 yards just to get the first downs.
Yeah, right
Like
now,
it's nice that he can do that, but you
but you
don't
don't
want to
want it.
rely on that because that's when you get a bad knee injury or a bad ankle injury on a tackle from behind.
Yes.
And that is the last thing that the Chicago Bears and Justin Fields need.
Yeah. Right now, Justin Fields holds two NFL records. He
Yep.
holds the most for a rushing yards in a single game, and then a stat that I just kind of struggled to believe there. No quarterback has ever had 3 games of where they've had three rushing touch or a rushing touchdown of over 50 yards or more in history. He did that in a month. And you're just sitting back going like, okay, yeah, it's like the nickname of just him Fields is really starting to come to fruition there, because if you add just a little bit more help to him,
Yep.
oh my goodness, he is going to easily be a top 5 quarterback, no questions about it, because we're seeing the not only the running ability but the passing start to click with him.
Yes.
He's not necessarily like last week against Green Bay. I saw stuff that I'd never seen, that I starting to see more and more of, that I'm like, okay, this guy gives me the confidence where he looks like he's going to start to move and just run, but he stops on a dime, makes a quick pass and makes the smart decision. And I'm like, yes, these are the things that I love to see, and it's so refreshing, because I can't tell you the last time that I've actually looked at a Chicago Bears quarterback and been like, we got one, because I
Yeah.
don't think I ever can been since Jay Cutler have been able to truly say, like, we got ourselves a guy.
Yeah. And honestly, that Chase Claypool trade, that's a big win for both Pittsburgh and Chicago, because I really think he has the talent to be a number one guy. If he can get out of his own way and not get too arrogant on when he makes big plays, he could be that number one receiver that you guys are looking for since Allen Robinson left.
Well, I also, a lot of people have been saying that they're a little bit disappointed in Chase Claypool's play, and even Ryan Poles, the general manager, he had to go back and talk to some of his guys at Kansas City and saying, well, how come like you were able to trade for a guy and just seamlessly integrate him? And it goes, well, it's because we're using him out of the slot. Like like getting a guy in a new system out of the slot is a hell of a lot easier of a
Mhm.
transition of a guy than now having to learn what is a pretty decently complicated playbook that Luke Getzey runs here in Chicago, and he's an outside wide receiver. And
And I always said Claypool should be a slot guy. Even if he's your number one, use him like a Cooper Cup. Use him in the slot more often. Also, because of his size, you guys are such a run happy offense, and that guy can block. He is
he's been
big, he is
amazing
strong.
in blocking this year.
Exactly. And that's what I wanted them using him for in Pittsburgh more, was in that slot position, beside a guy like Pat Fryermuth. So essentially you've got seven blockers, eight if you throw a fullback in there on a run, and you're just gonna run over everybody.
Yeah.
You use him like Heinz Ward always played. He's got good hands, but he can throw a big block on a guy and knock him down.
Yeah. But we're kind of getting close to the end of this, even with a few technical hiccups, as something that we've always done here. Give me your top 5 teams in the NFL right now, Sterling.
Top five right now. Well, that is tough. Let me take a look at the standings here and see how we're looking. While I take a look at this, I had one I wanted to pose to you. We're looking at a really unique week 18 coming up, final week of the season. Is there any game that you are really looking forward to seeing in that final week that could be a potential game changer for the playoff picture?
Um, I 100% think there will be a game like that. The only thing is, right now we're still, no team has officially made the playoffs as of yet. So I think it's still a little too early to kind of look at that week 18 matchup and really have a good idea of which one of these teams is going to be able to, have like a potential upset, kind of like what we saw last year with the Raiders and the Chargers. I still think it's just a little bit too early to kind of say. I think we're probably going to see it in the next 2 weeks of like, okay, like this game, or this game. But right now, I still think it's just a touch too early.
Fair. Well, the one I'm looking at that I think could be very unique if things keep playing out the way they are is Jets at Dolphins in week 18. With where they both are in the standings right now, with how things could shake out, we could see these two teams play against each other and a win resulting in both teams missing the playoffs.
Yeah, that could be a very interesting one. Obviously,
Mhm.
once we get closer to week 18, that'll be a very, very different discussion. But how you
Yes.
feeling with your teams right now for top 5?
So my top five right now, I've got the Eagles at number one, followed by Bengals number two. I think that's going to be our Super Bowl matchup this year. Behind that, I have Chiefs, Cowboys, and Bills.
All right, so yeah, we both have the same number 1 and 2. You said Chiefs are number 3.
Yes.
Yeah, then I have the Buffalo Bills and then the Dallas Cowboys. So actually, I
Okay.
think we might have the exact same.
Yeah, I've just got the Cowboys and the Bills flipped.
Oh,
I
okay.
think that Von Miller is going to hurt them a lot. Honestly, I was debating on putting the Dolphins ahead of the Bills.
Fair. The only reason that I have the Bills there is I have more faith in the Buffalo Bills than I do the Dallas Cowboys. That
Fair. I
just
don't
might
have faith in
because
either of them come playoff time.
yeah, yeah. And that's just the thing. We might have the Minnesota or the Miami Dolphins. The only issue there is we saw Tua play horrifically this week. Is that going to be a trend, or was it just a bad game? We'll need to see. But yeah, those are the top 5 things. I don't have anything else. How about you?
No, I mean, honestly, I think how it looks right now, I think our championship games are going to be Bengals and Chiefs again. We're going to have a rematch of that with the Bengals winning. And then in the NFC, we're going to see the Eagles and either the Vikings or the 49ers. It depends on how Brock Purdy progresses over the next few weeks.
Yeah, and if Garoppolo comes back, because he's not ruled out for the rest of the year.
I don't know, that ankle injury looked pretty bad. I think even if he does come back, I don't think he would have enough to be able to win that way. I think the Niners would have a better chance sticking with the healthy Brock Purdy and relying heavily on a unique run short pass offense using Christian McCaffrey and the other weapons that they have there. Because really that I think would be their better option. That they need someone like a Matt Canada calling their offense right now.
I think they're pretty happy with Kyle Shanahan.
Probably. I would take Kyle Shanahan over Matt Canada.
Oh,
I'm
I
just
think
saying that the
most teams would.
style of
Yeah, no,
yeah,
I get you. You just want to trade Matt Canada for
want
you
him
know,
gone so bad.
but
Unless he
that
can
is
change things and learn how to call a second half of football. Because honestly, with the way things have been going, if we play second half like we play first half, we'd be putting up 35 points a game.
we'll see. But that is everything. Well, thank you all for coming out and hanging out with us here today in the return after a little bit of a hiatus. But we will see you guys all next time.